Okay.
Okay. All right, let me go ahead and see if it'll record. This call is now being recorded. Yeah, every time that guy says that, it never records. But we got yours going, right?
Yeah.
Right. All right, so welcome to our show, Master Blaster Podcasters, putting misinformation on blast. That's our theme that we haven't said in a while. Welcome to our show again. Thank you very much for joining us. Dirty Mouth is here on the other end.
Yes.
Up in Anchorage, Juneau, Alaska, excuse me. I have family from Anchorage. And I'm Dylan here in Chicago. We're going to talk about American terrorism today, which can be said as domestic terrorism. I was trying to create, and what we were trying to do is create a new sort of theme around terrorism, which is basically using violence and different forms of violence to get people to comply to your ideas or to what you want to do. Now, we were originally trying to make this a theme of like political terrorism, financial terrorism, and basically violent terrorism. Now, the definition of terrorism technically has violence in there. There has to be violence if, I guess like we could try to create our own term for terrorism and describing things. But what we're going to get into is the alarming and growing rate of violence that is being used by the right-wing extremist constituents, basically, to try to get their political point across rather than using democracy. And also, too, we're going to highlight the backing up of these violent actions in the form of January 6th and the Charlottesville protests and many other, of course, the mass shootings that we've talked about previously, which there is certainly the people that are committing those acts as far as the mass shootings, some of them are politically motivated. In fact, a lot of them are towards one side. And we're going to talk about how a lot of these right-wing politicians are dangerously egging them on and basically saying, yeah, we're going to take our country back, using different types of what was mean for the victims of a democratic free voting system to have people that back them up go out and commit acts of violence to scare people into either not voting or whatever the situation is. Now, Dirty, let's get into this. Let's talk about some of the obvious examples of American terrorism that we want to cover on this episode that we've experienced. Number one is, and I know you've heard this, talking about Trump especially. We say him a lot because he's really trying to weaponize violent terrorism into getting people to basically not vote. It's not enough that they're trying to redistrict different areas to make it tougher for some groups to go out and vote, basically taking an area. And instead of having 3 voting groups in a certain area, whether it's mostly minorities, they'll slim it down to 1, so that you have to wait hours upon hours to actually get there. They're trying to change the curriculum and the evidence that you need to support your American citizen to vote. And now, what we're hearing a lot, too, is Trump saying, hey, you know what, go and show up on voting day, and he did this in 2020, and why don't you monitor the voting lines and see maybe he confront some people there, you're really an American citizen, which is laughable because how would you know just by looking at somebody? It's just another way of trying to target somebody based off of their color of their skin. I can't imagine how else you'd be able to target them. But how have you heard of these acts of attempted terrorist acts to stop people from voting, certainly obviously in one way or another?
Yeah, I mean, I called my I called my representative and called my I called not the city council, but I called the representative Senator Murkowski of Alaska, who's been actually at times she's been pretty objective to some of Trump's things, but I called who I can, and I called City Hall, because we have voting booths there, or close to me, and I just I was concerned, so I was like, you're gonna have like cops there, because Trump just ordered, he just asked that people go out and vote or poll watch. And there were like incidents around the country where this really happened, and it's totally, I believe that's illegal. I think they outlaw that back in the 20s or 30s, but it's bullshit, and it's very fascist, and it's scary because it's just like you can't say democracy and then have poll watchers during the voting. Near a voting booth. So.
You mentioned that it's fascist, and a lot of people are saying that Trump and his little corner, which is getting smaller and smaller and smaller as time goes on, has been slowly trying to acclimate their voters to the acceptance of fascism. So whether it's restricting voting or saying, hey, I wish my people would salute me the way that they do in North Korea, or boy, how about if I serve multiple terms? We get to work democracy. We don't have to show up for subpoenas, which are, I'm not saying that every politician shows up for every subpoena, but boy, did they subpoena a lot of people when they got charged. What do you think about and it seems like the people on the right slowly start to accept this. It's okay to use violent measures to try to get a point across rather than democracy. And these are the people that supposedly the constitutionalists, right, who obey the Constitution when it comes down to it. It seems like they're doing whatever it takes to stay in power. And the horrible thing is that the people that are voting for them seem to be okay with any measures that are taken for them to stay in power. Do you see the slow, basically the slow anticipated acceptance, or the right wing trying to get their party, especially their voters, slowly to be okay with different types of fascist behavior in government?
Oh yeah, I don't know if it was. I don't know. I think it took a lot of people pretty fast. Kind of like this. For somebody who's like just a bigot, like it was a sigh of relief for them, so they took to it and basically had somebody to represent them in office. So it's just I think they took to it pretty good and pretty fast and pretty obvious, especially that during that one on the campaign trail in 2015 where he went to Chicago. That was like a shit show, and there were like thousands of people showed up, and then you had the people inside who were like beating the fuck out of people. So
something I found very alarming when the whole Russiagate thing was happening, which is very confusing because it's very obvious that Russia did intervene in our elections. It's obvious that they used bots to try to sway sides towards Donald Trump. I don't know how the administration, I know that a couple of people in his administration did go down. That wacko general guy, I can't think of Flynn. Yeah, he was the first one to go down within a month.
Right.
Which is the fastest. And I'm not sure what his title was, Secretary of Defense or something like that.
Right.
But as soon as Trump got in office, what did he do? He brought in Russian intel in there and showed them around and basically gave them a tour of the White House.
Just them.
And just them. And something I thought was disgusting is the Republican voters were like, did they put a poll question out in, I think it was Rasmussen or one of the major polling companies. Like, are you okay if Russia intervened in the election? And the Republicans, 40% said, yeah, I'm okay with it, as long as it's for our side.
Right.
It's really disturbing when you hear those kind of things, because that is actually people being okay with using undemocratic, un-American, and fascist ways to try to keep power and to try to get things done politically. It really is, it's topsy-turvy. Everything is on its opposite from the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
When it comes to the Republican Party. And folks out there, listen, this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to tie these. We're going to talk about mass shootings a little bit as it relates to the subject. We're going to talk about January 6th, which is the ultimate terrorist act to try to overthrow the government, and it just happened. And a lot of these things are happening. People talk about them. They get swept under the rug when another massive thing happens shortly after that. Also, the protests. We'll talk a little bit about the protests, about how violence breaks out, and how one side seems to be more violent than the other. You can agree, disagree. We'll talk about it. We're trying to tie this all together into what's going on right now. So that's why we've already done a podcast on mass shootings. We've mentioned January 6th repeatedly because I think it needs to be hammered home how negative that was for our country, and what signs basically future signs you can see towards one side is basically trying to move towards this ultra-violent, non-democratic way of staying in power, and how illegal that is, how un-American it is, and how scary it is from supposed constitutionalism.
Yeah.
So that's why we keep mentioning this over and over again. Dirty, let's talk about, I guess we can start talking about a little bit, because I know we've covered this in the past. Let's talk about maybe January 6th, if you want to veer into another topic. Feel free. But that was the ultimate, sort of, you talk about a coup organized by Trump, knowing that he probably wasn't going to win the election, knowing he was going to try to say that it was fake, that it was a rigged election. This whole thing, it just kind of reminds me of a premeditated murder. This whole thing was premeditated, and it's still going on. How can we tie together January 6th with an ultimate act of terrorism related to who was conducting it, who was involved, and who led it?
Everything just points at Trump. He was talking to, I believe, the leader of the Proud Boys, or he was communicating somehow, and then, who's the guy with the eye patch?
Oh yeah, the dirty trickster?
Yeah, no, not Roger Stone, but Roger Stone was in connection. He was, I think, talking to somebody within the, in his team of people.
Are you Crenshaw? Are you Crenshaw with the eye patch?
No, not that guy. The guy who was in the is it 3%ers? Or no, not Patriot Front. Anyway, there's a guy who went down, he had an eye patch. I can't remember his fucking name.
Is he part of the right-wing hate group?
Yeah, he's a leader. Stuart Rhodes, yeah. He just got prosecuted a couple months ago. And he was talking. I think he was actually talking to Trump directly. There's a video of like Roger Stone, Stuart Rhodes, Tario, the guy, the head of the Proud Boys, and this other chick who's she's like a right-wing nut. Anyway, there's video of them because there was a documentary crew hanging out. Because I thought that was kind of odd. There's a documentary crew hanging out with them as they're doing all these. They're committing treasonous acts, and there's a lot of things connected. You could find a lot of traces of law enforcement, like rogue law enforcement, rogue like currently serving or veterans, connected. There's tons of groups that are connected. It was all intertwined. Is it Bumble or what's that shit they use?
These are with the application where they connect and plan stuff out.
Yeah, that was like a hot app where people were communicating through that. Because I think it's protected, like, so that everything is supposedly protected, security protected. But yeah, man, it was all a shit show. And there was even cops. I mean, there were cops that were beat, and that's fucked up. But then you have some of the cops were taking selfies with these people, like, and then you found out that what else was the big connecting factor? That
military cops. There's connecting pieces as far as like somebody was giving the head of the Proud Boys or some people that were in the riots tours of the Capitol building the day before. That's when they started investigating inside job. That somebody helped. That politicians were actually. I think Marjorie Taylor Greene's name was mentioned.
Lauren Boebert, she was giving tours. She was the first person that reported to be with a group of people, which is very odd. Doesn't happen. And there's a lot of evidence towards a lot of people that they haven't really pursued or anything. But yeah, I mean, it was, you had Flynn's brother. He's the one that held back the National Guard. They were just hanging out waiting. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much.
Yeah.
People were.
Well, it's okay. Well, we can quickly go through these because I know that we've talked about these at length in previous episodes. We'll just try to hit up on these topics to see if we have anything new to say about it. But it all does relate and tie together. Just like these, we're trying to make these episodes kind of like The Conjuring and Annabelle and with the Nun, and they all tie together. All of these, American democracy, which we're going to do at some point, the January 6th, this Amerikkkan Terrorism, together with stuff that we talk about in daily news, it all ties together in one big scary new American theme of democracy doesn't matter, violence is the way to get things done. Now, how about this? I've for years been pissed off at Democratic politicians for being weak sometimes, for not stepping on the throat of the other party when you are right and you have them in the position that you want. You step on their neck. And basically, there's nothing you can do for voters that are okay with siding with Russia. There's nothing you can do if voters are like, I don't care about what the truth is. I just don't like abortion, and no matter what the president does, I'll always vote Republican because of that one issue. There's nothing you can do about that. But there's something you can do if you have the, and I'm veering off a little bit about this, but it's just about the difference of the politicians. There's something you can do if you have the ex-president who's got 4 indictments who every single day goes after members of the prosecuting party.
Yeah.
And we're talking about how violence has been used. I mean, they just had having the Pelosi trial right now with Paul Pelosi, who somebody showed up his door with a hammer and really wanted to kill, besides January 6th, really wanted to go after his wife, Pelosi. They tried to actually go into her home. It was seen like they released information on Obama about his home an hour later. There's somebody there with a gun.
Right.
So what you have, then again, you have Trump sitting there saying all this stuff, and nothing's happening to him. He's had a $10,000 fine, a $15,000 fine. The fucker should be in jail.
He should be in solitary.
He should decide, and when you have people who have done a lot less in courtrooms that get put away, that are held in contempt of court and go out to jail, It's just disgusting when you see what he's allowed to do. And I'm so pissed off at these fucking judges. Not the New York judge about the civil trial, but the Georgia judge. He should be in a Georgia. He should be spending nights in that Georgia jail cell. And I think she's being whippy by not putting him away. And it makes Democrats look weak. I know she's a judge. I know she's not a politician. But you're a little tired of Republicans pushing the spectrum as far as they can, daring Democrats to hold them accountable. And time again, they don't.
Right. They don't. Nothing in the system. I don't know, like when he was it Georgia where he went in and got fingerprinted and then he got to leave and it was just like, what is this? Like, what's the point of this? And then go afterwards, go talk shit. And it's like, I don't know anybody who has this luck except for like, maybe Al Capone during the 30s where he had free reign over Chicago, but it just makes it when people say it's a law, it's like kind of a joke now because like, what does that mean? Like this guy should be in contempt, but to contemplate contemplate how people will react, it's like what the fuck is that? Like that don't care about any other crime in the reaction, but this guy is like protected. I mean, it's weird.
Yeah, it sets a precedent that justice is not equal. Whenever American citizens can see this, because we're all held to a certain standard, whether or not we're out in public, whether or not we're at our jobs, whether or not we're with our friends and families. When we constantly see injustice and the people committing the injustices not being held accountable, it really does something about your belief and faith in the system. So call it what you want. Justice, what goes around comes around. Karma is not really the right word, but anything that involves people being held accountable, that isn't happening.
Right.
It makes people angry, number one. Number two, it makes people lose faith in the system.
There is no faith anymore. Like people, Bernie Sanders had to break up the guy who was the head of the unions, and one Republican douchebag, I think from Oklahoma or whatever, and they got into a fight, and it's just like, it's a joke. And he's like, come on, people don't believe in this as it is. People don't think they don't take this shit seriously, and it's like, we don't. There's no reason to. You vote for some of these people, and then you hope that they represent your community or your district or whatever, and it's like you find out they're paid off, and it's like, it's getting thinner and thinner, the faith we have in the system at all. Like when anything good happens, it should be celebrated, but it's a fucking joke, man, and it's crazy. And I understand people who are poor, and I understand working class issues and all that, but it's just, but it's these people who react. There's a lot of people who are just, I can't believe this, really naive about things, basic things. People all of a sudden are fucking, they're a lawyer all of a sudden, or they're a doctor all of a sudden. Everybody takes it upon themselves to do what the fuck ever, and you just become very delusional and react on it, and it's now, it goes from a joke to now it's like serious, and it's affecting people's lives, like, and it's, either the Karen shit, or the vigilante shit, or the mass shooting shit. There's all these things that, like, nowadays, your words matter more than ever, because some freak will fucking get inspired. You don't even have to be famous. You don't even have to be put out there. But if somebody even gets a sniff of a good idea, quote unquote, they're gonna fucking try it out at least. All these mass murders, and I'm not trying to go off into mass shootings, but they use their manifestos. They pass them along. They're like informational. They're informational Bibles for shooters, and it's like, there's a lot of terrorist manifestos in these, and it's like they study these things and they learn, and then they do it, they become more successful or, more inspired, and it's fucking dangerous, and they're doing nothing about it. Like, there's this, it's like these people in January 6th are, finally, it's like a toilet that's been clogged. Like, finally, there's people going down. But it's like, you saw the guy who was that, the mega shaman or whatever fuck he's called, douchebag.
Yeah, with the animal hair around his shoulders and the Viking hat.
Yeah, failed. You'll find a lot of similarities in that whole group is like failed actors or failed people, like people or successful, business owners, but like a lot of failed actors I know are people within the entertainment industry or big business, and it's fucking, it's weird, but they feel like the most vulnerable group in this country, and it's just like it's crazy, and they're ruining our lives slowly.
Not to mention, you talk about the types of people that were at January 6th. They're also fake tough guys.
Right.
Because when they were together as a gang, as a group, they were tough as could be and yelling at the cameras and I'll kick your ass. And then you get them up in front of the jury.
Crying.
And they're crying like little pussies. It reminds me of everything that Trump, this is what people don't understand about Trump. All this shit that he tweets, he says about 5 to 10% of it, him or his lawyers, say about 5 to 10% of this when they get in front of a jury, but they could actually be, because if you actually try to say this in front of the judge or in an official court case, then if you're lying about it, well then you're in trouble. Or if they can cross-examine you and prove you wrong, then you're in trouble. If you're so tough and you have all these things to say, you have all this evidence, you would present it to the judge, you would present it to a court so it could be official. Tough guys actually can back up what they say, not just say things out in whatever their social media platform is. They actually will say it in a courtroom because they'll put their ass on the line and say, this is true and this is why I'm saying it, in a situation where somebody could prove me wrong, I'm in big trouble. You mentioned mass shootings earlier. That is actually our next topic. We'll try to keep this original from some of the things we said before. We've mentioned that a whole topic of gun control in one of our previous episodes. A mass shooting that does tie into American terrorism for obvious reasons. Look at the amount of mass shootings and how they've increased over the past 20 years. It's horrible. It's horrific. And it's become the way that right-wing extremists try to get their point across. I understand that this is a small amount, but it's a small amount that's that amount bigger than people are on the left, how they're dealing with their opinions, how they're trying to get their opinions across. They're voting. They're actually going out there and protesting. There's something that they don't peacefully protesting. And by the way, I'm researching these episodes, and I don't have access to all the information. I can't find one violent outbreak from Antifa, and the right wing keeps mentioning Antifa. We have all these mass shootings with the right wing wackos. I can't find anything where anybody's died in an Antifa protest where they've gone after people on the right wing and killed somebody. Have you?
No, they don't use guns. Well, that's not true. There was during the Kyle Rittenhouse thing, there was a guy who had a pistol, but he never shot it. No, he shot it at him. But yeah, for the most part, they're like 90% usually non-violent. The only time there's violence is you'll find that the cop who's rogue, will act and do things, or you'll see like cops openly just, like you have the cop that dropped off bricks to make it look like somebody who had access to bricks was supplying ammo to Black Lives Matter protesters or Antifa. Didn't happen. It's just there's a lot of shit, but for the most part, they're only there because they're like the makeshift security. Because the cops a lot of times they just turn, they just don't look, they don't pay attention, they just let the shit happen. the violence. So yeah, it's a lot of it. It's bullshit. They keep using that shit. That the boogeyman, and there's no proven evidence. You can look. You can go to the FBI website. They don't have it. They put them on terrorist lists, but there's no evidence that they're a terrorist. They're a threat.
We know that there were fires in Portland.
Right.
We know that there was property that was damaged. They do go after property, do defame property. There have been building, and the thing is, I don't know if that was specifically Antifa people or if it was just, hell, you get some college kids that are drunk. I mean, some of them will get violent. Some, men. So when you're talking about Wisconsin, you're talking about Portland, I don't know those. I know that there was violence at those.
There are violent people, but a lot of times they come in from other towns. They get inspired, and it's also one of those moments where they want to just wreak havoc and act crazy, and they're not really there for the initial reason of to promote stopping cop violence and murder. They go and they just want to destroy shit. So it's either like an infiltrated cop or a fucking just an asshole that just doesn't care about the repercussions of his actions or her actions, and just wants to break shit, throw shit at cops, like shit like that. So
right now, both groups do claim that there's infiltration either by bumping in people to different protests or people claiming to be on the other side, and they fuck shit up just so that one group can get blamed for that. Both sides, I don't know how much evidence there is of that. Both sides purport that to be part of the situation when it comes to protests and if violence breaks out.
Yeah.
Who's responsible who started it? Going a little further along the mass shootings part, you said that there's manifestos out there that those guys put. And some of the stuff is public. A lot of these guys put this on social media before they enacted it. And the funny thing is that I know that they use social media when it comes to. I'm going to talk a little bit about gangs later on as part of American terrorism, separate from politics, really. But some of that stuff goes on YouTube, and that's how some of those people get caught if they're in a violent encounter. I know that in my neighborhood there was about 60 different gang members shooting at each other a few years back. It was captured from somebody at the fourth floor of one of these buildings. They put it on YouTube, but. I mean, a lot of this stuff is posted on social media. The difference is that I know YouTube is more of a public forum. You can have private accounts, but we haven't gotten a lot of okays, I guess. The big one I think of is Elon Musk when you talk about not willing to release accounts to stop terrorism. And he supposedly is very, it's all about privacy. Unless somebody makes a clip about him that he doesn't like, then all of a sudden it becomes public and he kicks them off the forum. Everyone else, privacy is of the utmost. I don't mean to go too much into a side thing about him. He might be more on our daily news show than we do, but the anti-Semitic comments that guy makes, he's such racist as shit. He's someone that should not be in control of anybody else for any situation that I can think of. I'm not saying he doesn't have any business acumen.
You would think that, but he created he re-released I don't know what you call it, revamped Twitter to become X, and even before that though it's like he let the fucking floodgates open with bigots and let everybody who's shitty back on. And then like that's also another thing that, they had moderators, and they would watch it, and it was, it's kind of an issue because it's so much negative and violent shit, but they had people watching that shit and they were aware of it, and then he just got rid of them. He fired that, I think, department or staff. And, so it's like this, ongoing thing. He just yesterday was like like just not even subtle, just agreeing with this guy who made the most blatant anti-Semitic racist comment ever, and he praised the guy. But he comes from fucking South Africa. He's Afrikaan. Like he's a descendant of like another oppressive group of people. Like South Africa with the white people is like insane. Like that's why you hear a Dutch accent. You know, it's just he comes from racist bigotry in his family. His dad's a fucking famous diamond miner. Like it's the most like racist thing going, industry going on in different African countries. And it's like he comes from that. Like he's a fucking piece of shit.
Yeah, so we'll go off into a tangent on that. Dirty, maybe we'll continue that in the news episode. But bringing it back to mass shootings, there's an alarming amount of mass shootings that have happened, and it's the ultimate expression with January 6th as just another example of using violence. You can argue about mass shootings, about how deeply political the people really are, because when it comes down to it, you can argue what's more important, politics or violence. And to some of these people, violence is more important. Politics is just a means to, is an example of using the means, the ends to justify the means. The means being you just want to be violent. You just want to kill some people. Because, at the core of it, some of these people, when you bring them and you ask them, someone is like, I just wanted to shoot somebody.
Right.
That's part of what they do. I picked liberals because, it's almost like you wonder if they really believe it, or if it's one of those things where, as an example, like if you're a killer, you can make your mind think, oh, I didn't do it. If you tell yourself you didn't do it over and over again. I think some of these people on the right don't really believe all the stuff about the left. They just tell it to themselves over and over again.
Yeah.
And it allows them to get into this violent debate so they can, like, this is okay. This is why I'm going out killing people. Really, there is no real reason. It's just that they're human beings that never should have been born. I don't know how else to say it, but it's like, if there's any excuse for, if there's any excuse for a woman's right to choose besides the actual right to choose of their bodies, people are talking about, every life is dear and important. That was a lot of human beings I see.
Right.
A lot of human beings I see. I don't mean to be a lot. I'm not saying it's the majority. But there's plenty of instances of just disgusting human beings that shouldn't have been born in the first place that allows me to believe that, like, I think people should have the right to choose. Anyway.
No, I agree with you. I was just saying, I agree with you. And to add to that, we live in a society where there's so many easy weapons and tools for anybody who's a fucking halfwit, dangerous halfwit, who's violent, who's easily manipulative, to go and like just cause havoc and to ruin people's lives and destroy families. Like there's so many, there's so many different tools to aid these people and their fucking bullshit. Like it's really fucking easy to get a gun. It's super easy to get, drugs and, information on how to make bombs. And, you have like the Anarchist Cookbook, which that guy who wrote it he's regretted ever since. But like, it's just too many, it's just too easy to create a terrorist in our society. There's all these different avenues that, like, instead of a lot of good things, we have, I think, it seems more bad things ready and accessible,
Yeah, we talked about, I think before we mentioned this in one of our previous episodes about the difference of American terrorism. And the reason why we call this American is because for years and years and years it's confused whether or not it's, the Middle East, not Islamic people exactly, but Muslims in 9/11, or whether it's Asians with the Kung Flu, or trying to think of other groups that have been really marginalized. But it's there's a perception that our biggest threat comes from outside of our country. Now, Russia's a big threat. North Korea's a big threat. China's somewhat of a threat. If we stop giving them money, then, maybe they'll be a little less of a threat. At least not saying giving them money, but in China, I guess we're heavily in debt with China for whatever that means. But this is just to show that our biggest threat is from within. And the horrible thing is you could ask either side, I think, what the biggest threat is. I think that right now, if you ask the left, like, what is the biggest threat? Is with within or without, and I think that a lot of them would say, boy, we are not on the same page within our own country. They would point to some of these examples that you and I are talking about on the show, and you'd have people on the right side, they would certainly say liberals are the biggest problem with the country. The difference, though, is that with liberals, that goes way back. I mean, you can go back to the 80s, or you can actually go back to the 60s.
60s,
where with the hippie movement is the government and Nixon and all these people thought like, wow, this is the big thing that we don't need in our country, to be anti-war, to be to open up things for minorities and women, to have freedom of equality acts with employment, whether or not it's with women with different positions, people attaining CEO positions, having opportunities. So you go way far back as to when the elite right, not elite as far as brain power, elite as far as how long they've been in control of the country. And the problem is with this country, when you're talking about the elite being in control, the further back that people are in control, as much as we're talking about Elon Musk, the more disgusting it is the more further you go back.
Right.
There's the old money in this country. You know what it is? Old tobacco money, old cotton money, old. I'm trying to think of the other crops, the other ways to make money. There is certainly talking about gangs later, going back to prohibition, which basically created it exploded. Gangs exploded after that.
Right.
So the older you go back into our country, the more, as far as people being rich, being in control, is really kind of disgusting. It's all about slave labor. It's easy to be successful when people are working for free for you. That's why you have all these rich Southern families in their heritage, and some of it, that's where it comes from. So as time goes by, all these families that were once rich and prosperous, some of them stay rich and prosperous. Others that aren't, though, look around and they're blaming women, they're blaming minorities. All these equal opportunities, this is the problem. No, the fact is, you weren't that fucking smart to begin with. Your family and your bloodline, and they shouldn't have been rich in the first place. And you had a little time span where you were lucky to have the wealth and have the power that you did. But then when it comes to other people actually stepping up and taking that power away, rightly, democratically, we're talking about a capitalist business system where the best, the brightest ideas will survive and thrive. They don't like that, and that's what they try to rig the rules.
Right.
So I'm saying that I would guess that you would agree with that, but what do you think?
I totally agree. We just live in a society that was that's successful because it was made on the backs of people who worked for it, who built this shit, and you have the colonizers who benefited from it and designed things, but yeah, you can see a lot of people having an issue with other groups or other nationality, other ethnicities of people coming up. So it's a matter of they can't handle change, they can't handle evolution, so they get mad and buy a gun and they take it out.
Yeah, so much for the bootstrap theory, because these are the people that they don't want to give the public organizations, just things that are going to actually help single moms, things that are going to help people that are financially destitute or are living in poor areas. They're like, oh, you got to institute the bootstrap theory. You got to do this from the line. You know what says that? Rich people. rich people grew up as things given to them. And this is a completely, totally different topic. One example, because I'm a big sports fan, there's nothing more disgusting than the longer I become a sports fan that I recognize how disgusting the owners of these franchises are.
Oh my God, it's the modern day slavery, dude. Like the way they treat black players. So it's weird, and this attitude of like superiority, and they can say whatever they want, and treat people like shit. And you know, they use the players up, and then by the time their career's over, they were never, they used like fucking cattle, you know, or oh my God, like horses, you know, and just shoot them.
That's appropriate.
So it's
the funny
weird.
thing is, the biggest business in sports by far is football. The NFL. You know what is the funniest about football? Football institutes a socialist system to keep the business thriving and to keep teams from being too good, we'll say. If you're smarter than others, if they put in self-protective systems to help the team from being bad. You can only spend so much money on your team. You can't overspend. There's a ceiling on how much money you can spend. I forget what they call it. I can't think of it right now, but it's basically the cap. The cap money. You can spend money on players, but you have to have 53 players that you pay, and it has to all be within the team cap. You can only spend so much. That's to save them from themselves. That's to make sure that they have profitable businesses, smart, fucking supposedly smart rich people. This is an inclusive way for the business to say, hey, we're going to make sure you're profitable because you know what? You might not do it on your own. That's how smart these people are, that they have to have. And basically, when you can sign someone to a contract and release them, there's guaranteed money and there's non-guaranteed money. The non-guaranteed money, even if you sign a contract,
people, you can go online and you don't even have to even see your victim in person. You can destroy their lives online and take out every personal thing about them, their finances, their health records, everything, and you can ruin somebody. You can take things from social media, from whatever, hack their files, and you can put it online, and that'll be another effective way of destroying somebody nowadays.
Well, that's what I meant, is destroying people's lives without actually putting a gun to their head.
Right.
We talked about some of that with income inequality, with the rich multiplying and growing and hoarding the wealth, giving less and less to other people, the erosion of the middle class. All of these things are ways of terrorizing. And by the way, the old George Carlin joke about, you talk about terrorism a little bit, is he said the lower class does, the upper class does very little of the work, makes all the money. The middle class does all the work, makes little of the money, and the lower class is there just to scare the shit out of the middle class.
Right, yeah.
And I just mean, like, just as a personal note, I've traveled here in Chicago to a lot of the poorer areas, working at hospitals, and man, I've felt a lot of hatred from people that connect me to something that I'm not connected to, based off of, I'm guessing, my skin color. But so in his statement about the lower classes that are scared of the middle class, it's basically, if you see how they live, you're talking about people that are destitute and poor. When you're going into poor areas, if you're a certain ethnicity or skin color, you certainly will not be welcome. People might intimidate you or try to, quote-unquote, terrorize you to not be there, even if you're there to help out their hospital or whatever.
Right.
But it's a way to, the rich don't ever have to. You mentioned it with, we're going way off topic. We got to get this back. The last thing I'll just say is, Bill Maher mentioned when he said, why would I go to the poor areas when he's sitting there talking about the difference of the middle class and the poor. talking about the ultimate,
ultimate douchebag.
idiot statement by an idiot. First of all, how are we doing on time right now? Are we getting close to an hour?
We're 54 minutes and 40 seconds.
Wow, okay, so we only got really 20 minutes. Jerry, the way I want to finish this is we could do a little bit more about violent rhetoric. Just to finish off the first topic, I want to get into gangs a little bit. I'm going to say a little something about it, and you follow up. Some of the disgusting, we know about mass shootings. We know what happened on January 6th. We've seen protests end violently, like the one in Charlottesville, where people end up dead, or the one in Wisconsin, where Kyle Rittenhouse killed a couple of people.
Yeah.
And yet you still have people like the moron that used to be the governor of Alaska, Sarah Palin. I'm glad I barely remember her name anymore. And we have other Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert not only firing guns in their campaign ads, but using this rhetoric about you better take your country back. It's time to step up and take the country back.
Right.
And they never put in there like the way to do it is to vote. The way to do it is this. They never downplay the violent part of it. Just to talk more about the heavy metal groups that we love and I love, and they don't downplay their listeners' association with Nazism. You talked about politicians. What would be responsible for a politician to do amidst what's going on? It would be to reassure the audience and to reiterate that this should not be used. Violent measures should not be used to get this done. They don't want to do that.
It's also illegal too. Like you can't. Freedom of speech is one thing. First Amendment is one thing. But if you incite riots, it's illegal. If you provoke somebody to commit a violent act, I believe that's illegal. Like Charles Manson never actually physically committed any crimes himself, but he manipulated people into doing it.
Right.
So then that's why he was treated so harshly. So I mean, basically, I think what you're leading up to is like Trump. Like for instance, a couple nights ago, he had a speech. And he started calling everybody, all his enemies, vermin, which is specifically connected to Hitler. He referred to Jewish people and non-Germans as vermin, and so it's like he incites violence all the time. That's one of the biggest concerns with these weak ass judges is that people react, but it's like no matter what, like people will react. They love this guy. They fucking will. They're on his every word is like a speech of golden knowledge, and so it's amazing how that's an effective tool right now and a method to cause harm. Your words.
Yeah. And you made a good example there of Charles Manson. There's kids these days. When I say kids, they're treating some of these kids as adults, like high school kids that talk people through social media, even not even face to face, into committing suicide. They do it, and then the other person has charges against them for whatever that crime is.
Yeah.
Persuade somebody to commit suicide. So absolutely it happens. The difference is they seem to be going more after the kids with the online bullying to grown-up politicians. That's what I never understood. It seems like the people that are supposed to be the most responsible are held to the lowest standards. The President of the United States should be held to the highest fucking standard that there is, and instead he's held to the lowest.
Yep.
It's really quite disgusting. Anyway, okay, so let's get into now, Dirty, you didn't really want to include this as part of the episode. I do agree that I'm going to talk about games here related to American terrorism. I completely agree this could be its own subject topic, its own episode. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But if we're talking about American terrorism, using acts of violence to persuade other people to do what you want rather than they want, I can't think of I shouldn't say I can't think of a bigger example, but if you look at the history of America, gangs has been an enormous piece of the puzzle when you talk about violent terrorism. When terrorism is described as an act of violence against somebody within the same state or within the same country, a quote-unquote like citizen as you. So in other words, not a Muslim, not somebody from North Korea, an American against an American. The only thing I do want to do is give us just a little teeny background, because when we talk about gangs, it's different than right-wing militia groups, in that right-wing militia groups, they very well could be poor, but them being poor doesn't seem to be, at least from what we hear from them, the reason why they're acting out violently.
No.
It's usually for a political reason, or a reason that they're crazy. So the way the gangs come about is, we've talked all about income inequality, and we talked all about, I think we mentioned, something back in the 1920s about prohibition, which was an end for people, and the whole thing with gangs started with every nationality that's come here, you're on the bottom of the totem pole.
Yeah.
And back in the late 19th century and early 20th century, it was quick, one after the other. Irish, Italian, German, then the next, you get a little bit higher up on the pole when you have a wave of immigration from the next group. Obviously, the one big difference factor in there is African Americans, because they were forced to come here, which is different than everyone else. But gangs comes about, obviously, from its lineage, from people that don't have opportunities. And we talked about what happens when a town doesn't have an opportunity, with cities that don't have offer opportunities. What happens? Well, in other countries, they call them cartels. And in America, they're called gangs. That's basically resorting to ways to make money, because you don't have a natural way to make money. You don't have a community job to go to. You can't get a job at the bank. You can't get a job. The old joke about Irishmen when they first came to is you better either be a policeman or in a gang. And if you were black, you better either be a pastor, or you better be, at least later on, you better be good at sports, better at entertain Whitey, I guess, or play jazz or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So gangs are coming from a different perspective as how they're created versus violent hate groups. So there is a clear distinction in that regard. Having said that, I think the same way that we get calloused to acts of mass shootings. Oh, another 10 people dead today in this shooting, and then a week later, another 6 people dead here, 12 here, 8 here. And then next thing you know, it just becomes a part of the news cycle. Here in Chicago, I know that it's become a part of the news cycle too. In a lot of the major American cities, 10 shot this weekend, 12 shot this weekend, collateral damage, a 2-year-old shot, collateral damage, a 6-year-old shot, mother of 2 shot, and now the kids have to go into different, go and live with different people and uproot their family. It's a big problem, and it's a problem that every single weekend you can see the statistics here in Chicago to prove that it's a problem, and it's something that I think that people here in Chicago, if you live in Chicago, there's all kinds of, the number one thing about being the mayor is what are you going to do about gangs? Now, there's plenty of other problems here in Chicago besides gangs. That seems to be the number one thing that people hone in on. In fact, the last mayor, Lightfoot, got heat a little bit, saying we have to eradicate gang members, I think.
Right.
And people are saying, well, there's a difference between eradicating gangs as opposed to gang members.
Right.
And this is part of what we're talking about. But just a few statistics. You can use your eyes, you can use your ears, you can watch the news. But the fact is that nationally, and I'm getting this from the a few different websites. The FBI has their own website where they calculate statistics. The nationalgangcenter.gov gets those. All of them get those from the FBI. Some of them get them from local police departments. They're the only ones that calculate these because they have the numbers. They calculate this with either when the person goes into goes to the hospital, they go to the ICU if they're in the emergency room, they go based off family members, they go based off where they are, location, the colors that they wear, the type of weapons that they know are infiltrating certain communities. There's a lot of different ways. It is not a perfect science to determine if somebody is in a gang or if they aren't. This is the best method we have now. According to the numbers, America, there's 15,000 homicides annually. 2,000 of them are gang-related, versus 13% of all the national homicides. Here in Chicago, over the last 5 years, every year is a different statistic. It's been between 43 and 70% of fatal shootings were gang-related.
Yeah.
And we're talking about, obviously, drugs. We're talking about robberies, burglaries, not even to mention rapes, other forms of violence that are used. And Dirty, you know this, I haven't talked about it lately, but my wife and I am a widow. My wife was a public defender for the city of Chicago. She used to defend, she defended more than a few people that were involved in gang activity. And she didn't have too many nice things to say about, obviously, there's some of these people that she was trying to defend. In fact, I could say all kinds of words of what she was described of disgusting animals, but then, you know, she was Black American. So this isn't a white person saying this about different nationalities. By the way, it's not just black. I mean, the number one gang is a Latin king in Chicago, which is not a black gang. But the numbers are horribly high and still high, and they rotate. Sometimes they get a little lower, sometimes they get a little higher. But there's a lot of collateral damage that happens with violence that revolves around gangs. And can some of this be eliminated by legalizing some drugs, making prostitution legal, making gambling legal? We know that sports gambling is now legal. I'm not sure how much into gambling current gangs are. That's like an old mafia thing where you get into sports betting.
Mm-hmm.
And there's big differences of all different types of games, the different nationalities of the games. They get into different rackets, basically.
Yeah.
But, Dirty, I know this is a long intro. It's just that based on all of our discussions, I thought this was more of me issue wanting to talk about this rather than you. But please feel free to add anything to what I've just said, how it do relate to American terrorism.
I mean, from my perspective, I agree with you totally. You know, each gang has a specified niche of, you know, making money, but it's through violent means, you know, dangerous or, you know, of course illegal. But what I want to add too is, so you have you know, the ethnic gangs, Mexican Mafia, which is another huge gang. You have the Black Gorilla family, which is like a prison gang. They're really big, and but the other ones, which are connected to literally connected to terrorism, are like the white supremacist groups in prison. A lot of them are connected to the outside gangs. And also, I want to mention, there's a gang called Armenian Power, and there's ties of them to, I'd want to say, and somebody can look this up themselves, whoever's listening, they're connected to ISIS and I believe the Taliban. So there's different connections, you know, worldwide. But yeah, you have like, you know, the Nazi lowriders, you have the Aryan Brotherhood, you know, the Aryan Nations. I believe they're still around, or they used to be. They're a really big connection, but they're connected to like the Klan and a lot of militias, you know, which lead to domestic terrorism. There's a history of that. which now would be like the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys and all that shit. But there's it's a bizarre, like, intertwined circle within the crime community. And also you can find connections with, like Manson was connected to the Aryan Brotherhood. John Gotti was connected to the Aryan Brotherhood. And then it's weird, it's like, you can find different militias, and I sent you information on the group, the base, and it's like they're connected with not, justice gangs, but like military. It's crazy. It's like this ongoing thing. I should make a map of it, because it's bizarre. I mean, it's really bizarre, the interconnections that these groups have. Like you would think like, well, the Aryan Brotherhood, they hate everybody who isn't white. It isn't true. They work with the Mexican mafia. Those are one of their allies. Just like there's some Native American gangs that are connected to white nationalist gangs. And there are a lot of gangs within the military, especially back in the 80s and 90s. You had a lot of gang members who joined the military, who were committing violent, crimes while they're serving in the military. And so it's crazy how all this stuff is interconnected, and it's and I don't know. I don't know how much to go further into it, but it's a very intricate system of things. Like you were talking about the Latin Kings, your wife and I also were talking about how when she was doing doing research on them, and she was really surprised how intricate and organized they were. And it's just, I don't know, it's interesting, complicated.
Yeah, it's interesting how the higher ups, kind of like in a business form, try to keep themselves as much disassociated with the lower tier members so they can't get caught up in the RICO statutes.
Right.
A story that I shared before, a very unfortunate story, was I used to live in Oak Park, Illinois, and I used to work at I used to manage a coffee shop called Brothers Coffee Shop, a lesser known version, much lesser known than Starbucks.
We're gonna get sued.
Even lesser known than, what's that?
I'm joking. I said we're gonna get sued now.
Yeah. Well, they're out of business, so they can't sue us. Even less than Caribou Coffee. Very small chain. But anyway, and afterwards, me and my friends would go over to Fridays across the street, on Harlem Avenue there. And there's a guy that used to bartend and bar back there, especially bar back, a younger kid. He was only 22 or 23, and he was a recent graduate from University of Illinois, and he would go back there every once in a while and sell acid.
Oh,
he would get like sheets of acid, which I don't know what to say about the drug. I know that it's not pot as far as its seriousness. But regardless, he was selling something that people wanted, and he got caught, and he got 2 years. 2 years, a hard time to kill the X. Right. Which at the time, this was like 20, 25 years ago, he's going to be mixed in with murderers and rapists. I don't know how much segregation really happened at that time. I know they tried to do this a little bit better now with drugs versus violent criminals. But at the time, me and my friends even joked, like, man, get a swastika tattoo, get something. Try to be connected. Like if they think you're connected to white power movement in prison, not jail, prison. But if you think you're connected to that, or if you think you're connected, it can be a way of saving yourself from serious hardships in prison. I don't know whatever happened to the kid, but it just follows along the lines of what we're talking about. You go to prison, you better have some kind of backing. Otherwise, yeah, and by the way, some kids on the streets, I've heard stories of kids getting killed because they wouldn't affiliate themselves.
Right. Mm-hmm.
They get gang in some neighborhood.
Right.
So, like, you better be a part of us or else. If somebody doesn't want to do it, they end up dead or their sister ends up raped. Sometimes both. So sometimes it's, boy, I better do this, or the alternative is not so good for me.
Right.
So it's not always by choice. Anyway, all right, I think we've exhausted these topics. How are we doing as far as time?
We're at 114 minutes.
Oh, are you sure it's not an hour and 14?
That's it.
Okay, now so I think we're good. All right. So, all right. Well, everybody, this is our episode on American terrorism. Hope you liked it. Please leave us comments and suggestions. On behalf of Dirty Mouth, I am Dylan.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, guys, for checking us out.
Yeah.
We'll talk to you next.